This is the Merkava tank. Home-produced by Israel, it is the pride of the Israeli military and a symbol of its military might. It is one of the best protected tanks in the world.
I do know for sure what the Merkava is, what the Israel soldier is. And both of them can hit any other tanks and soldiers around us, no matter the numbers.
But in the modern warfare of today, guerrillas are challenging the role and the relevance of the Merkava.
A man in a ruined building with a handheld missile that was designed in the Soviet Union in the 1970s can still destroy the most up-to-the-minute digitized tank that the world has produced. And the Merkava is no exception to that.
On July 12, 2006, Hezbollah guerrillas in southern Lebanon moved across this border into Israel. Their target was a group of Israeli soldiers.
There was a unit of Israeli forces at the border. It was the last day of their duty. They were going home the next day. And no doubt, like all of us, perhaps they weren't following the instructions and their orders as precisely as they should. This was the opportunity that Hezbollah had been waiting for.
Hezbollah ambushed the Israeli unit. They killed 3 soldiers and captured the remaining 2, taking them back into Lebanese territory. The Israelis had in place a carefully worked out drill for exactly such a scenario.
Codename Hannibal was put into action. This is the drill which is implemented when soldiers are kidnapped.
Operation Hannibal involved the artillery and aerial bombardment of bridges and roads around the location of the capture. The aim was to prevent Hezbollah getting far with their captives. In the heat of the moment, a local Israeli commander ordered a Merkava tank into Lebanese territory to pursue the captors. Hezbollah was ready and waiting for such an eventuality.
After just a few meters of entering Lebanese territory, the tank ran over a landmine. It exploded, killing all 4 soldiers.
The tank and its crew had fallen into a well-laid Hezbollah trap.
What happened was a reckless decision by the commander in the field to send a Merkava to try to stop the hijacker.
A squad was sent to rescue the Merkava's crew. It was met by a Hezbollah ambush. There were more casualties. So early that day, in addition to the 2 who'd been kidnapped, Israel lost 8 soldiers. This is not an easy thing for Israel.
The losses enraged the Israelis. A cabinet meeting was hastily convened.
They decided to go to war after the chief of staff came to the cabinet and he presented his plan and he said, give me 5 days. With the Air Force alone, we are going to crash the Hezbollah. There will be no fighting capability of the Hezbollah. So they gave him 5 days.
"5 days proved to be an overconfident estimation of Israel's ability to crush Hezbollah. Israel continued to come under attack from Hezbollah rockets. Israel's relentless bombing campaign was not working.
It didn't succeed because Hezbollah had been preparing for this prospect. It had been preparing by building bunkers, tunnels, using caves.
No one, not even the Israelis, knew anything about this network of tunnels, 20 to 30 meters deep in places, They had everything inside them: rocket launchers, ammunition, food, water, all they needed.
After 8 days of aerial bombing, and with Hezbollah still firing rockets, Israel decided to send ground troops into Lebanon. Israel had withdrawn its troops from the occupation of Lebanon only 6 years earlier. Now the Israelis were going back in, supported by columns of Israel's celebrated Merkava tank. The Merkava was the pride of Israel's armored corps. The Israelis considered it to be the best tank in the world. But it was to face stiff resistance from Hezbollah guerrillas.
The problem was that in front of the Merkava was little units, soldiers, foot soldiers, with anti-tank missile. And even the Merkava couldn't handle the advance of the new anti-tank missile. Even the Merkava can't do it.
The Israelis were surprised by Hezbollah's new weaponry. The modern Russian-made anti-tank missiles Hezbollah was using had been acquired from Syria and Iran. Hezbollah was using them with deadly effectiveness. The Lebanon war was going increasingly high-tech.
Israel developed the Merkava and turned it into a symbol of Israeli military technology. It showed it off to all the armies of the world. It became a legend. And so, in response to this, Hezbollah acquired weapons with the aim of destroying the Merkava. They developed, and we developed too, and we surprised them.
Hezbollah fighters were waiting in tunnels and bunkers. To the surprise of the Israelis, they kept emerging like ghosts to strike the tanks entering Lebanese villages.
Hezbollah was waiting for the tanks, and they knew exactly how to hit them. They knew exactly where the soft spots are, and they use missiles, and we have lost several of the tanks and a lot of soldiers.
Such losses were of great concern to the Israelis. Merkava tank was a powerful symbol of Israel's military superiority. Yet well-armed and well-trained Hezbollah guerrillas were firing at the tanks from very close range and scoring direct hits. It seemed as if the ghosts of a past war were coming back to haunt the Israelis.
The Israelis were facing another war, a war like that of '73. Its opponents had determination and modern weapons, and so the Merkava was in a situation against Hezbollah fighters similar to that of Israeli tanks against Egyptian infantry in '73.
The 1973 Arab-Israeli War was known by the Arabs as the October War and by the Israelis as the Yom Kippur War. It had been a painful lesson for Israel, and in particular the Israeli Tank Corps. 6 years earlier, the Israelis had comprehensively defeated the Arab armies in the Six-Day War. However, by 1973, the Egyptians had rearmed, mindful of Israel's mastery of tank warfare.
The
Soviet Union supplied us with large numbers of anti-tank guided missiles. They were distributed to all levels of Egyptian infantry units.
The Israeli Tank Corps at that time consisted of American-made Patton and British-made Centurion tanks, which the Israelis had upgraded. Israel did not yet have its own tank. On October the 6th, 1973, thousands of Egyptian soldiers crossed the Suez Canal in an attempt to reclaim the Sinai captured by Israel 6 years earlier. The Israelis sent in their tanks to repel the attack.
The Israelis expected that the Egyptian infantry would run away as soon as a tank approached, but this time no one was running.
The Israelis attacked in their usual tactics, and they were met by an incredible barrage of handheld anti-tank wire-guided missiles.
This was the first time in history the anti-tank guided missiles had been used in war.
They lost many tanks, and this was a shock to them. We learned later that most of the Egyptians who came over, those kids, were carrying an anti-tank missile.
The Soviet-made wire-guided anti-tank missiles used by the Egyptians proved stunningly effective. Israel lost hundreds of tanks during the 1973 war. This cemetery in Tel Aviv holds the graves of many of those tank crewmen killed in that war. The Israelis had paid a high price for failing to take heed of new innovations in anti-tank weaponry. This sobering experience was the catalyst for a momentous decision. Israel would build its own tank, a tank that would become known as the Merkava.